welcome back to another episode of the Employee to Boss podcast. I am your host, Hayleigh Hayhurst, the owner of Espresso Podcast Production, a full-service podcast agency specializing in editing, marketing, and strategy. So I wanted to talk about why new businesses should have podcasts. Really why every business should have a podcast going into 2024. So we are in Q4, October, and I think this is a time where a lot of people have set that goal that they wanted to start a podcast in 2023, and time is running out. I mean, there's still time, of course. It's only October, there's still a couple months left, but I think this is kind of the time where people realize, oh shoot, like if I want to make this happen before January 1st, I need to do this now. I'm having a lot of people come to me and reach out for this exact reason. So when I work with my clients, I can turn around the podcast in about a month. So let's say you reach out to me October 20th. By November 20th or before, maybe like a little bit before, you will have a podcast. So the thing to remember is there's things that you have to prepare for. You have to get your logo, you have to record in advance, you have to get your music, get your branding, and then you also have to submit your podcast to show up on podcast platforms. And so it's not an overnight thing where Apple Podcasts itself can take up to 2 weeks to show up. Sometimes it takes less, sometimes it takes the full 2 weeks, but what I always like to know is it's not going to happen overnight, but once you start taking the action, it happens fast. So what I mean by that is if you thought about starting a podcast, let's say it was on your New Year's resolution checklist, then you've probably been thinking about it all year. And you probably have an idea for it, you probably have a vision, and so that has taken you time to come up with. Now that you have that solid idea, it can happen rapidly. You can have your logo, it doesn't have to be super professional to start. It could be made in Canva. You can find music there's free sources on YouTube and royalty-free music and stuff like that. So you can pick that. You can record your trailer, you can record your first episode, you can reach out to a couple guests. And once you start taking action on starting your podcast, it can happen very fast. You just have to decide to do it. And I think this is the biggest part for a lot of people that holds them back. They're like, oh, I've been thinking about this, and they kind of have imposter syndrome or analysis paralysis or something along those lines where they've almost overthought it. They've almost thought about it too much that they're like, nope, can't do it. It has to be perfect now. So if you're kind of in that stage or you're like, is a podcast right for my business? I wanted to go through my top 3 reasons why every business that wants to scale should have a podcast in 2024. Reason number 1, easy, my favorite reason, is the amount of content that a podcast will give you. So I think a big misconception is like every podcast goal is to monetize. And you don't have to monetize your podcast in a traditional way, like by having sponsors or by having guests pay to be on your show. Those aren't things that you have to do. Now, if you want to go into affiliate marketing, if you want to just have affiliate links, if you want to have a sponsor, you can have those, of course, but to start, you don't have to. And so the ROI of your podcast can genuinely just be the amount of content it gives you to grow your business. So every podcast episode that I create for myself and for my clients, I create anywhere from 5 to 15 clips. And so I'm assuming this episode will probably be about 20 minutes. So I could probably get 5 good clips from this that I can share on YouTube Shorts, TikToks, Instagram Reels, And then the full episode will go on YouTube as well as all the streaming platforms for Apple. So that's a big reach right there. That will give me content for the week, 2 weeks, whatever it may be. And that is my favorite part of having a podcast. Whenever I have guests, the episodes are anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And from that, I can have so many amazing clips that I give to them as well. I put my logo on there, and I do the same things for my clients. Whenever they have guests, I put their logo on there so people know where the clip is coming from, of course. And I'm thinking I'm going to do like a little training video on audiograms because they're misunderstood, I think. I think just with social media as a whole, it's confusing. And so audiograms, if you don't know what I'm talking about, is where you could take the video, cut it down to like a minute, and put it on a graphic. And so it's like just a short cut down video. Traditionally, audiograms were just an audio clip that you would pull and put it on a graphic and then post it on social media. Post it like a reel. Before reels were big, you would post it as a post. So audiograms have really changed even since I've started in the podcast industry. And so they're always changing. And so I think if you have questions on this, let me know, because that is one of the best ways to grow your reach. And so depending on what the goal is for your podcast, and if you go back a couple solo episodes ago, I talk about this, like what is the goal for your podcast, I would really recommend listening to that, because this is, once you have that goal set, this is why you need a podcast. So just the sheer amount of content that a podcast will give you is game changing for your business. You no longer have to run around recording reels. You don't have to run around recording short form content. It doesn't have to be 3 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon and you're like, oh my gosh, I haven't recorded a single reel for the week. Or, you know, it's a Friday and you're like, ugh, I didn't get a single video out. That's the trap of short form content, really. It's, you always have to be recording new things. And yeah, you should be recording little clips and using trending sounds and all of those things that people will tell you about Instagram. But when you have this long video that you can cut down, you just have to sit down once and record it. It makes it so much easier. So that's number one. Number two, the second reason that you should have a podcast for your business going into 2024 is nurturing your audience. There is a shift in the online space right now with how buyers buy. I've been paying more attention to trends in sales lately. And, you know, before, I think people were buying things that maybe they didn't fully need, or maybe they were buying from people that they didn't fully know. What I mean by this is maybe you were posting a good reel and people were like, oh my gosh, I need to buy this worksheet, or I need to get in her coaching program. And I think that people are a little more conscious now. Buyers are a little bit more conscious of who they're working with, how that person impacts their business, and that's great, as they should be, right? That's how I found my coach, through the way that she showed up online and the way that people were talking about her. So the second reason you should have a podcast is for nurturing your audience. This is big. People want to feel like they're getting information from you and they're like, oh, this is so good. What is it like going to be working with her? What is it going to be like once I pay her to be in this program? What's it going to be like once I do this or that? And so once you're able to nurture your audience and give them all of this great content from your podcast, the interviews that you're doing, you will be able to convert them. When I said that you don't have to typically monetize your podcast in a way of a sponsorship or something like that, you can definitely just put in your own commercials. I'm a huge proponent of that, and almost all of my clients have commercials if they have a business that they do sales in. Some of them are in more niche businesses, like authors who maybe don't have a book that's coming out now, but they're just building their audience and nurturing the audience that they currently have. So when it does come the time of a launch for their book or whatever it may be, then they have this audience that cares about what they have to say and follows them because they have been nurturing them throughout the year. So that is number 2 of why your business should have a podcast. And now my third and final reason is to build your authority. So by having a podcast, you will be seen as the expert in your field. You will be seen as the go-to person to listen to. I always give this example of if you're looking to hire a business coach or a podcast manager or anyone who's a service provider that you are going to work directly with. Let's say you're really torn between these two people, and then one has a podcast that you can go and listen to, their voice, the way that they talk, the way that they explain things, and then one only does, let's say, social media content. Now they both might be great. They both might have great content that they're giving, but the podcast, you can go and listen to way more because Reels are only so short and Instagram stories delete after 24 hours. So there might not be like a great way for you to connect with them. And so once you're able to connect with someone, then they are seen as the expert and you're like, yes, I should work with this person because I trust them and I know that they know what they're talking about. So by building your authority, you really have the upper hand on your industry. I would say most industries can be seen as competitive right now. I think that there's tons of coaches popping up. There's tons of virtual assistants, tons of podcast managers even, tons of, I wouldn't even say competition, but it's just, there will be so many people who can do what you do. And so by having a podcast and a place and an outlet for you to share why you do what you do, how you do what you do, like how you do it, you will be able to leverage that audience even more. And I think that that is really exciting. And so if you're on the edge of like, should I have a podcast for my business? Let's chat, because I'm going to say the answer is probably yes. But if you wanted to run some ideas by me or just kind of have a strategy session, definitely just reach out to me. My Instagram is Espresso Podcast Production. You can also check out my Facebook group. And in a couple of weeks, I'm actually hosting a webinar about how to start a podcast for your business in 2024 that I will be sure to promote. And so if you want to be on the list to get the invite first, message me and I will be sure that you get all of the details. Because if 2023, like if you're not ready to start by 2024, like if you're not ready to connect with me now and get your podcast up and running before the end of the year, definitely it should be on your goal, your to-do list for next year, early next year, because you don't want the whole year to get away from you like it may have this year. I hear so many people say things like, I've been talking about this for 2 years, 3 years. I've been thinking about this for the past 3.5 years. I'm like, okay, let's just make this happen. So it is time to make it happen. There's so many great ways to leverage the podcast. I talk about marketing in other episodes, so definitely go back and listen. But like I said, if you have any questions, come and connect with me on Instagram or check out my website. Those would be the best 2 places. All right, I will talk to you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to the Employee to Boss podcast. If you made it to the end of this episode, I hope that you implement the actionable steps from this week's experts so you can get started with your business today. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the Employee to Boss podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Remember, a little progress each day leads to big results. We come out with a new episode every Tuesday. To access our show notes, transcripts, and courses, please check out espressopodcastproduction.com.